Welcome back to another episode of the Twin Elements podcast, proudly presented by Venture Hunting and Outdoors. If you're like us and passionate about hunting, spearfishing, and many other outdoor-related pursuits, with an eagerness to fast-track your learning, then this podcast is perfect for you. Alrighty, legends, welcome back to another episode of the Twin Elements podcast. Today, James and I are sitting down and we are revisiting one of our very best and actually probably the longest hunt duration adventures that we've been on to date. This is a little bit of a throwback way back to September 2023, where James and I actually slogged it out for around 20 odd days hunting elk in a limited entry unit in Montana in the United States of America. So hopefully by now you've all been and seen the film over on our YouTube channel. We released that film shortly after the trip finished. It goes for around half an hour and we'll have a lot of what we were set to talk about here in this podcast. So we actually wanted to jump on and just chat about things a little bit deeper and sort of relive some of these stories from the trip. We also have plenty of good news, so if you like this podcast and have loved the cinematic film in the past, then please, make sure you're following us on YouTube, subscribing to us over there, because in the next couple of months, once we're back from this America trip, we're going to be releasing an 8-part sort of vlog-styled film series from this old hunt with plenty more footage and behind-the-scenes clips. So make sure you stay tuned for that one. As per usual, we will also be answering a few FAQs at the conclusion of this podcast. FAQs which have been sent in by you guys, your fellow listeners of the podcast. So as always, if you guys have any questions, please email us directly at info@twinelements.com.au. Please use the subject line FAQ. And for those of you that are on social media, please send us a DM through to our Instagram or Facebook at Twin Elements, Ayden Doumtsis Outdoors, or James Doumtsis Outdoors. Without further ado, we'll jump into the podcast.
So giving you guys a bit of background history and context to this hunt, this is what we would call for sure a once-in-a-lifetime hunt. So I was incredibly lucky to draw this tag. I only had 1 point at the time. Had been to Montana the year before and hunted a general unit and went in the next year with essentially only 1 point for a limited entry draw. So after talking to the guys at Hunt and Full, they were the ones that helped me they essentially picked this unit as a bit of a Hail Mary. And after talking to those guys, after I actually drew the unit to get a bit of context for the video, and obviously later down the line this podcast, it worked out that my draw odds for successfully drawing that tag in that unit was about 1 in 300. So there's only 50 tags a year that are issued in that unit, of which 5 go to non-residents. So pretty small draw pool. Was incredibly lucky to be able to draw one of those tags, and obviously led to a fantastic hunt where I'm sure a lot of you guys have seen in the video. We had an incredible amount of elk encounters. We were pretty fortunate to get onto some private property, which originally we thought we were only going to be able to hunt for a couple of days. And just a call out for Hunt and Full once again. It's probably, they didn't necessarily make the trip in helping me draw the tag. That was just purely up to luck. But they definitely helped make the trip in terms of the hunt strategy that I had going into this would have been not nearly as robust and not nearly have as many options if I hadn't spoken to them. Even with all the background knowledge, which I tried doing myself, really was nothing compared to what they had done. They actually had one of their advisors who'd guided in the unit before, and hence why I actually got onto this very competitive private property and was able to hunt on there without a guide, just sort of because they vouched for Ayden and I, which was fantastic. But yeah, we had a couple of options. Originally, the hunt was going to start on public and then lead into private. So we did a little bit of scouting there and then went on to the private, where we were only meant to have a couple of days. But due to cancellations of some other hunters, we were able to extend it and do a combination of private on the same property and some BLM access that was pretty close to that private. So end up not needing to go on to the public, which was fantastic. Not to say that the public over there don't have great hunting opportunities. In the same year that I shot mine, there was plenty of 350-inch bulls that got shot on the public ground. It's just that only about 10% of the unit is public and 90% is private. So it's one of these units that you are sort of dictated on where you can go, and you end up hunting a lot of BLM and private property. So during the hunt, you would have seen that we got into plenty of bulls. For me, I was looking for one over the magic 350 number. That was sort of the objective that I had in my head. It was probably a misconceived idea. Now knowing that, well, we don't really know how to judge even red deer or fallow deer here in Australia very well, let alone trying to score an elk where you're not that around all the measurements and how long a brow tine is and so on and so forth. So it was probably a bit naive to have that number in my head, and probably should have just been going off a big mature bull. Obviously, as you've seen from the film, like the biggest giant bulls, which we knew that lived in this unit that we did have some encounters with, you can very much tell that they are a giant, and that was sort of the top end that we're going for. And it did make it a little bit hard, having only been hunting over in the US once for elk, and obviously getting the bull the year before and being very happy with that, to then go and get this tag. Like I did say, I probably would have rather go in another 5 or so years, but you can't help when you when you draw the tag, and we certainly made the most of it. So that's sort of the background introduction of this hunt. And
I think one other thing that's sort of important to, I guess, discuss what really sets this hunt aside from other hunts in Montana is just the high population density of elk in the area. I guess being a limited unit means that they're selecting more for trophy size and potential rather than like hunting opportunities. And as you would have heard us discuss on plenty of the other podcasts relating to elk and hunting in the US, some of these general units in Montana might have 18,000 tags distributed for, a general licensed hunter, of which, only 10% or so might get filled, but that's still a whole lot more elk being harvested and shot by hunters, let alone the ones that are potentially wounded or taken by predators in the winters and all these sorts of things. So this unit in particular definitely had an increased population density of elk, as well as what seems to be an increased sort of bull to cow elk ratio, which you guys might recall us talking about when it came to like fallow bucks and does. And this directly translates to like increased rutting action during the rut. In our example, we saw lots of bulls in this unit. We had lots of really close encounters with bulls, and it doesn't matter necessarily if it's just a young spiker or a little, what they call, raghorn or something like that, something with the brow tine and a couple of points. These bulls are still running around, getting the herd bulls pretty agitated and pissed off, and basically that results in better rutting behavior and better rutting displays, which, there were some evenings where we were sort of walking back to camp well after dark, and you could hear 20, 30 bulls sounding off and bugling, and obviously, there's less pressure associated from other hunters in this sort of limited entry unit, which helps to make, this rutting behavior play out more naturally. But definitely there is a component of with, if you can say one bull to one cow or as close to that as possible, not saying that that's the case here. There was probably, 10 cows to one bull still from what we were witnessing, but that one bull has to fight way harder to get those 10 cows to, from another bull compared to if there's 20 or 30 cows available. They kind of are less, it's like if you've got $10 to your name, you're going to fight a lot harder than if you've got $1 million, I guess. So that's just something to keep in mind as we go through and sort of talk about this hunt.
So this hunt actually started on the 31st of August, which was a couple of days before the season opener, which was going to be the 2nd of September. We started off on public and then transitioned to private. And one of the big key sort of aspects of this, one of the key features of this first couple of days was it was actually really, really hot. Midday temperatures probably pushing sort of low 20s, which for an elk, as we'll discuss, is quite hot. And I imagine a lot of them would have just been hiding in sort of the deepest, darkest, thick timber. Another thing was because it's daylight savings over there, they were massive days. Like we were getting up at probably 4 a.m. most days. setting out, hiking out, trying to get to a vantage point because obviously with it being so hot and early season, they weren't really making noise, and just try and get glass on the mountain and try and see some elk essentially. We obviously saw none, as you would have seen in the video, on the public ground, but once we got to private, we were able to locate some bulls. We saw a herd of 14 bulls, which is more, it's funny because it was like the first day of hunting season. They're all small bulls, but it was more bulls than I'd seen, my whole period on public the year before. So that was quite refreshing. But even though they weren't making noise, they were still bachelored up and still pretty locked down with the heat. So we'd stay out most of the day just because we were trying to increase our chances and just glass and hope that something either made some noise or popped out to feed in a low gully or a dark shadowed pocket. Though we didn't really have much success. And then obviously same idea in the afternoon, just try and find a new vantage point, glass some new country and have a big long slog back to camp, normally getting back sort of 9, 10 o'clock, quickly pretty much eat, do like a little grunt to each other and go to bed, being pretty wrecked from covering a lot of miles all day and with heavy packs and camera gear and having to carry all your food and water with you as well. So first couple of days, probably a little bit underwhelming as well personally, from everything that you'd heard and seen and stuff like that. Everyone said it's going to be this crazy, hunt and unit and you're going to shoot a massive bull straight away and blah, blah, blah. And I probably did let it get to me a little bit. So it was a little bit sort of underwhelming those first couple of days where we weren't seeing a heap of elk, definitely no bugling and not that much or no rutting activity. Hadn't even seen any cows yet, which was a bit concerning. That was quickly going to change in the days to come.
So as James was sort of alluding to there, as the hunt sort of went on and as the days ticked away on this big adventure, it's almost as if the light switched on and suddenly where we were seeing, the odd bull or the odd couple of cows, we started seeing, cows and bulls together interacting, started with a lot more satellites and younger bulls sort of traveling the ridge tops and, the gullies and things like that. And then our first real example of when, bulls started actually showing a bit of rutting behavior would have been on September 3rd, if you guys have checked out the video. And, this particular afternoon, we were pretty much fogged out. We weren't quite sure if it was sort of even smoky because we'd had, wildfires up near Canada, in the weeks previous. And some of the early days when it was warmer in the afternoons, it was really hard and difficult to sort of glass into the evenings just because there was this layer of smoke around the mountains. But this morning, what made us, sure that it was obviously fog was that it had been super wet and rainy and we'd actually been in our tents just because we couldn't really film or do anything in the early part of the morning. And obviously that's one of the challenges of trying to document the hunt and film and stuff. But we used it as a good example to sort of refresh, have a good meal. And then as soon as that rain sort of subsided somewhat, we ended up heading up the mountain and to be honest, had a magical sort of, post lunchtime, magical afternoon on the hill with what ended up being a massive mob of elk. And I remember James and I had sort of made our way up to a bit of a glassing point. We're looking where we normally looked and then actually looked up higher on the mountain behind us. And, there was this massive mob of elk just sitting there and a few of them were sort of skyline, but you couldn't really see them just because of this blanket of fog. And then the fog would sort of clear and run through almost like a cloud bank for a few seconds. And then you'd just see an elk standing there on the horizon, probably 400 or 500 meters away. And it wasn't until we'd actually heard some bugles and stuff and looked at each other pretty excitedly. And, it became evident that there was one big herd bull within that mob and then a few subordinates. And they were out on the open ridges there. And there was probably ended up being about 50 cows in the end. But I just remember this sort of, being a real exciting moment. We'd finally found, a lot of cows, had a little bit of rutting activity. And I remember we didn't elect to actually go and stalk that bull. There was sort of no way that we'd actually get in on him where he was. But, we slunk off the hill and went back to camp that evening after dark, knowing that, hopefully over the next couple of days, we're going to get into more rutting activity.
And I think that encounter for me really probably was one of the light bulb moments, just showing elk's sort of behavior and characteristics in the sense of like we had, gusts of 30 or 40 kilometer winds, quite cold, rainy day, and they were like on an exposed hill face, just like chilling out, like nothing was happening. And it really illustrated, and especially for those like translating that to public ground or public land where you think you're in a really good spot, you're seeing sign, but if it's hot, they're probably just in the deepest, darkest timber trying to keep out of, the sun, essentially. It shows how like uncomfortable they get in the heat, compared to, like them being comfortable when it's like 8 degrees and in the wind as well, where Ayden and I are wearing puffy jackets and quite cold, and they're just sitting there casually. And I think that just sort of, really takes home for me what sort of environment or when you should be looking for elk in certain environments, in terms of, if it is really going to be hot, they're not going to be rutting very much, and they're probably going to be locked down in the deepest, darkest timber. So go and look for them there, as opposed to obviously like if it's raining and really freezing cold, well, maybe it is worth being out hunting and actually trying to find them. Venture Hunting and Outdoors is Australia's premier hunting retailer, with the mission to give Australian outdoorsmen and women the resource they deserve. Venture started from a team of passionate hunters and has transformed into a community. Through group events, top quality gear, exclusive deals, and expert guidance, Venture is more than a hunting store. Check out their website today to see what epic deals are available.
So that brings us to September 5th, and this morning we got up high on an elevated peak and a bit of a vantage point, and we had the spotting scope out. We also had binoculars and stuff like that, and way off in the distance, almost where you'd care not to sort of look, we ended up spotting a mob of elk. And there was, again, we bring up that bait ball analogy. There were a heap of cows in the center, and then spread out all around them, almost like, the predatory fish in that bait ball example. There were these bulls, and you couldn't really, from how far away they were, tell just how big they were. You could see the body size of some of them was definitely bigger, and then the big frame of their antlers was obviously like an impressive herd bull, compared to, the other younger satellite bulls that were, roaming around these cows. But we basically got a bit of a look at them, had checked out over the, last 20 minutes or so that there was nothing sort of in our vicinity any closer. And we thought, what the hell, we're just going to make a mad dash over there and sort of basically take a mental tab as to where we thought they'd end up for the afternoon. And it was basically that they were heading to this big patch of timber. So we basically spent the next part of the middle morning into basically lunchtime getting over there. As we said, it was probably 5 miles away. And by the time you traverse that with, all the topography and little gullies and draws and all that type of stuff, it had been a bit of a hike. But we'd put ourselves in a really good position on some new country where we thought that, this mob of elk were sort of going to be hiding. And as it turns out, in hindsight, they'd obviously gone through there and just kept going. But what was pretty cool was that there was actually one solo bull elk. Well, we didn't know it at the time, but we just sat there above this patch of timber, sort of waiting in a really good spot to hopefully, have a bit of action for that afternoon. And I think we let out a few location bugles on our way there. Nothing really fired. But then around 2 p.m, sort of later in the day, we'd been sitting on this ridge for a little while. Nothing had really replied to us. And eventually something did. And I'll let James, get into it a little bit here, because he had what I'd just call a back and forth bugle match with this one particular bull elk.
Yeah, so we were pretty high up on the ridge, sort of getting to the edge of where we could hunt, and where we anticipated that herd might come back out for the afternoon. And we did a bugle, and almost sort of behind us at this, bugle came out of this thick, dark patch of timber, which we'd sort of circled around. And so we dropped back down the ridge and, we're sitting across from this, and it just developed into this absolute screaming match between me and, this bull in the timber. And where that patch of timber was actually on a landlocked bit of BLM land. And there was neighbouring places that had access to it and could have hunted it. And so we weren't actually sure. There was a little bit of discussion between Ayden and I whether this was actually a guy in there that was bugling back to us, just from some of the squeals and whatnot that was coming out of this elk. We weren't really sure. And anyway, we pretty much sat there for like an hour, just bugling back and forth, glassing into the timber, had the spotting scope in the timber, and could not find or see, anything that resembled an elk in there. After, probably an hour, maybe a little bit more, outwalked this incredible bull, which probably is one of the biggest regrets of the of the hunt. He was a very, very respectable bull. We actually stalked him again later in the trip, interestingly enough as well, probably 5 miles away. But it's interesting putting all the footage back together and being able to piece it all together. But he was an awesome bull. And I think in my head, and this is where I'm talking about the dangers of not being able to judge bulls, very successfully, and having probably too much time. I didn't even really stalk this bull, to be honest, which in hindsight was pretty dumb, because he was a solo bull responding to our calls, gave us plenty of opportunities. Like sat there he came out and sat there raking a tree for probably 10 minutes or so on the other side. And definitely could have, with the thermals dropping down, we probably could have dropped below him. He ended up coming down the ridge anyway and coming up to our side and then moving across the ridge. There definitely would have been a chance there for a very, very good opportunity that anyone in their right mind probably would have and should have taken. But once again, just sort of, talking to people and knowing what other potential monsters lived in this unit, and it being only a couple of days into the season, still having 14 days or so left of hunting, obviously opted to pass. But in hindsight, probably should have given him a bit more time of day and stalked in, but he was a very impressive bull, and definitely one I would have loved to have taken, but it was good to practice all that bugling with a real bull elk.
And that's where I think for me, it's definitely an important, distinct moment for me, because I remember sitting behind the camera and for the first time, I just felt like we'd left the cup sort of, half full, and not, taking an opportunity that we should have. And I remember, because I was there to obviously document the hunt, and it was totally up to James with his decision making as to, what bull he wanted to take, what stalks he wanted to do. But I just said there's a massive difference, because he was sort of, doing some pieces to the camera saying, oh, we've just passed up this bull, will I regret it later or will I not, And as it comes, we had so many other opportunities, but I just remember saying, you didn't pass up that bull. Like, you passing up that bull would be you getting into bow range and putting an arrow on the string and, having him walk past where you could have shot him. And I just said it's important, with so many opportunities, not to just think it's going to happen. And I remember, we left that experience absolutely over the moon. As James said, we just had a bugle off with this bull, let him walk away, didn't disturb him at all. We then sat on that same ridge and, assessed for a few other animals and stuff. And elk, we didn't really see a heap, in all fairness, but we did see a heap of turkeys, some mule deer, a few other young satellite bulls and stuff moving around. But it was just a great, afternoon in the mountains, and probably one of our closest experiences and encounters up to that point. But I just remembered saying to James, like, I think, an important distinction is that passing up on an animal is where you felt like you could have killed it. And I think it's easy to say that when you're 120 meters away, on the opposite side of a ridge. But if you were there at 30 meters, like, you've got 90 meters there to obviously close the gap and things can go wrong. And I was just urging him to obviously, as the trip went on, not sort of pass on those encounters as much. Like, I know he had a certain bull in mind, but as you'll see, some of the differences in these bulls is purely just style. It's not really size. Like, they were all great, massive herd bulls and stuff in the end of it. But we it was cool going back to camp that evening, and having a bit of a laugh as to this bugle off that we just had with a bull.
So the next couple of days, we had some pretty cool encounters, back and forth, sort of hunting more so around camp. But it wasn't until sort of September 11th where we actually went and hunted some new BLM land that we probably had, what you would describe as potentially one of the best days of elk hunting ever. I mean, I know that's hard to say because we just had so many days on this trip. But it was a piece of BLM land, and we'd driven out early in the morning. I think we got up super early that morning. I think it was like 3 a.m. start or something like that to get there, because it was about an hour and a half drive. And you couldn't camp on the BLM, and there wasn't really anywhere public that you could camp near it. So we were staying on the private and driving all the way around to this BLM land. And we got there, and as soon as we got there, we just could hear bulls coming in every direction. Like, there was, maybe 6 or so bulls, maybe more, just bugling, and there was sort of this nucleus ahead of us. And we started making our way over to this area, and I remember all these elk, they were just coming around silhouetted up on the mountain, and we could see, like, as they sort of moved around the mountain, they became more silhouetted. And as the sun started to rise, we could actually identify how many elk were actually up there. And we, one of the big bulls that we identified pretty early up on the hill was a big 6x6. He was losing a few of his cows, and he had this big limp, which we ended up seeing later on in the trip. And there was, a few other bulls fighting and carrying on, and a couple of 5x5s, another 6x7. But there was just all this, action going on. And I remember looking, off to the side just as the sun sort of was getting to the point that you could pretty much actually see, and seeing this massive framed bull, and we couldn't really properly see. Just because he was sort of down in the timber and stuff, we couldn't really see how big he was. And it just, as this light became, it became more obvious. He was probably 800 to maybe a kilometer away. And then, once the sun actually rose properly, you could identify that this bull was actually a giant. One of those ones that, we've got photos and whatnot of him, and showing to people, like it's one of those ones that, would have been everything over probably 380 inches. He was sort of the bull that I'd had in my mind that we were coming here for. And obviously got us very excited. He had a couple of cows, and was being very quiet off to the side, wasn't really making much noise. And the thing that gave this bull away was he had massive G4s. So we affectionately named him Dagger Boy or Daggers, or Hellboy, depending on what the day was, just because of his ridiculously big frame. And with this hunt, we dropped down and moved in, and we ended up getting in right where he had his cows tucked away in this really, really, really thick bit of aspens. And with the wind and everything, no matter how we sort of approached it, we couldn't sort of get in there without busting the cows. And I just remember getting on top of the ridge, and it was fairly open. There was this sort of tiny little open meadow, and we'll set up about 35 meters off him, and we're bugling at him, and he was in the aspens bugling back at us, and we could see the tops of the trees shaking in there, and him screaming at us. We're screaming back at him. We could see a few cows bedded in there, but just couldn't actually, we'd see the Oz cow ear flicker and stuff like that, but couldn't actually get him out of this patch. And just had this bugle off for about 15 minutes. Nothing sort of progressed. And sadly, we ended up sort of slipping around, and I think one of the cows either winded us or saw us moving, trying to relocate position. And they sort of moved off, gave one sort of bugle maybe 100 meters out of this patch of aspens, and that was it. But for me, I was very, very, from that moment, sort of probably wrapped up too much so in this bull. He was obviously a once-in-a-lifetime bull. And there's not many people that shoot bulls like that anywhere on private, public, in any state. I probably had my hopes and dreams set a little bit too high on shooting Hellboy, but it was an amazing encounter nonetheless. To be so close, and potentially if he'd decide to walk out, could have been my day, but wasn't to be that day.
Cayuga broadheads are engineered for success and built by experience. These are the broadheads we trust for all of our bow hunts. Whether it's buffalo and bangtang bulls in Australia's Northern Territory or chital deer along the basalt wall, we have ultimate confidence in their range. I'm currently loving the 150 grain Zots. Regardless of your preferred broadhead, quality and performance is guaranteed across the range. If you would like to try them today or shoot them already and want to restock, head to their website and use code TWIN10, that's TWIN 10 numerically at checkout for 10% off your next order. You will not be disappointed. Following on from that sort of day, we woke up pretty early the next morning, and obviously, as James just said, that bull left a lasting impression on him. So we'd gone back and pretty much had the plan to get back to that exact same spot, hoping that, we'd left probably 50 elk on the ridgeline behind us. Never really actually hunted them, just because we'd gone and looked for, this bull that we affectionately nicknamed Daggers, that bull that was, anywhere up from 380 odd inches. Our hopes were to try and relocate him and put another stalk in on him. And as it turns out, we got there well before daylight and didn't hear a single bugle. I think we laid eyes on one bull, which was sort of a pretty handy bull, but again, nothing, in the ballpark of daggers or that bull that we were searching for. And as a result, we basically, we're sort of pretty disappointed, and we ended up heading back towards the car. Just to try and get to another spot. And we actually ran into a little old lady who was very, very sweet. And she'd informed us that she was actually spraying weeds that morning, and her team of weed sprayers had scared what we assumed to be the mob of elk that we were there to sort of target. And this had all happened in the first, hour or so of daylight. And that's why we weren't able to find these elk, where we left them to bed the night before. So she was very kind and actually gave us a lift and said, come over to our house and you should come and speak to, my son-in-law who's, manages the land and allocates who can actually hunt on, these certain blocks and things like that. And he was very kind after speaking there and meeting him and just getting a whole rundown of the history of the area and all these types of things. And just, again, a bit of an insight into where we were hunting, the type of people that manage that area and whatnot. It was really, really cool insight. But he pointed us in the right direction for that afternoon and was very kind to let us go and hunt a certain area. And we ended up heading up this tight little gully, and we basically followed it right up to a point where we could start overlooking a few of these deeper gullies and draws where we assumed the elk would be coming out of. And in a straight line, it wasn't actually really far from where we'd been the previous day. And funny enough, it wasn't until we sort of looked back at footage, but we heard a few bugles, crested over a bit of a rise and after a bit of a hike, and were able to get in on this mob of elk. And it was just in time before an absolute downpour occurred, and we got eyes on what ended up being a really nice 360-inch bull elk. And this was the same bull that we'd seen the previous morning, was a really big 6x6 with that limp. He had a limp in his hind leg from memory, which made him quite noticeable. And he was pretty pissed off. He'd obviously been fighting and probably been bashed or, defending his herd from other bulls and was a little bit sore and grumpy. So he was trying to just, chill out in the middle of this mob of cows. But with the amount of satellite bulls surrounding him, he just have to keep getting up. He'd bugle really frustratedly and then try and sit down again. And James and I were just sitting there watching this all unfold until that rain shower hit, and we sort of try to pack up the cameras while filming as best we can. But it was just one of those afternoons where I just remember this rain coming down, belting down really, and we were pretty wet and cold, but we just watched this mob of elk literally unfazed move across the ridgeline, and all this rutting activity occurred before us. And it was just one of those moments that you look back on. And again, we didn't even elect to stalk this bull, which James can probably dive into here for a second, but it was just one of those moments and, scenes in front of you that play out. And it's kind of nice to also not interrupt it sometimes and just watch nature just go about its business, and to see these cows and bulls interacting and then the rain coming down pretty hard was just magical.
This podcast is just turning into James's regrets. It's like my counselling session. But no, this bull was probably another one of my big regrets from the trip. Just once again, ignorance and probably stubbornness taking advantage of me. And I actually remember Ayden being like, he is a really big bull. You should go and look. Like, we should go down there and stalk him. I'm just like, nah, it's not Hellboy. It's not daggers. I'm not going for him. Like, I was pretty fixed on trying to see him again and get in on him. I remember seeing this bull, and it actually went bigger than 360. It was the property owner measuring it. So someone actually took this bull a couple of days later and measured it at 372. It's obviously a very, very big elk. But I remember looking at him and thinking, he's like an incredible bull, but he's not, the bull. And I probably thought he was a little bit smaller than what he obviously went. And so, decided to probably sit there at 100, 120 maybe, again up on the ridge and watch him. Once again, like really, there was a lot of eyes there, but with the satellites and him having to move around and stuff, we had like a pretty good amount of cover where we could have slipped in and had a really good stalk on this bull. Just opted to once again just sort of watch him and and not take advantage of the situation, which, again, dumb. But one of these things that you learn, and hopefully right now in September, I'm not being that stubborn, and hopefully I'm throwing myself at every opportunity, which is sort of what I've promised myself this trip, and hopefully having a lot more fun because of it, and hopefully a few less regrets. But definitely one of the big regrets of the trip, not stalking that bull.
A few, I guess, characteristics of this stalk and why particularly for me it was a bit of a lost opportunity was one, because again, we'd had that encounter earlier in the trip where we'd said, oh yeah, we passed that bull, but never actually even went and stalked him. Like there was a difference for me from saying, oh yeah, he's in a good spot, we could kill him if we wanted to, and then actually going down and trying to put that on the line and seeing how good we were. And to this point, we hadn't really actually stalked a bull with the intent of killing it, except for Hellboy. And even then, we got to like 35 or 40 meters, but we never really even saw the bull or had an opportunity to draw back or do anything and practice what we were preaching. So this one, for me, we were sitting there at, like 100 meters, 120. And what you probably can't appreciate from the footage is just how good the actual line of approach was. And then like we had a few really dark, like sort of steep gullies that we could get behind, and the topography was perfect to hide both, the hunter and the cameraman. And I remember there was a few other opportunities earlier in the week where, there was a bull elk by himself and he was, responding to our calls, or there was a bull moving across sort of a ridge line. But with two of us and in pretty open sort of country, there was no way, in my opinion, we were really going to get in on them, even if it was the bull. Whereas this situation was just perfect and screamed for, a bit of a stalk. And I think similar to what I was saying earlier about this bull just being super agitated, where he was bedded within the mob was actually closest to us. And from watching them for probably half an hour to an hour, anytime a younger bull circled down below him where we were, sort of like would have been closer to our approach, he would get up and race like 30 or 50 meters away from the cows down and sort of aggress towards this young bull. So in my opinion, if we were able to cut the distance from 100 meters, 120 down to around 50 or so from where he was, which I thought the topography sort of allowed, and then maybe rip a bugle if we couldn't get any closer, then in my opinion, he might have actually come down to be like, hey, who's in my vicinity? Like, piss off. And if not, even if they started getting up and feeding away, which the cows obviously did towards the end of the encounter, we might have been able to just intercept him as he was a little bit slower and sort of towards the back of the mob. And they're just a few like sort of characteristics that stuck out in my mind. And it's just things that, we didn't obviously, decide to stalk in on this bull, but it was just things that regardless of if we did any stalks or didn't, we talked a lot about what our approach would be, and we're trying to play the situations and scenarios in our mind just to keep us sort of sharp. And again, I do think this was a bit of a lost opportunity, not because of how big the bull scored, but purely just because what I was trying to remind James a few times was that not only is he trying to shoot a magical bull elk, but we're trying to achieve it on film, and it's just not going to happen, without much effort as we sort of, obviously start figuring out as these days sort of start to slip away. And whilst it seems like there was an encounter after encounter after encounter, and then there truly was, there's a lot of time, on this 20-odd day trip where there's nothing's happening, or, you start a stalk and 20 seconds later it's busted because of the wind, or that mob runs somewhere else, or whatever have you. There's just so many different variables that it's hard to truly portray in the film.
So now falls the anniversary of when I actually shot my first bull in Montana, which was September the 13th. And obviously a very special day. Got up that morning. Spirits were probably a little bit dampened, not being able to find Hellboy or daggers again. But we were setting back out there and back on the private, going to a familiar area where we'd seen all those cows and bulls up on the mountain earlier. And had a pretty quiet morning, but that afternoon, went back into some familiar territory just to sort of recheck in on the herd. And it was a spectacle to behold. It was truly Jurassic Park. Like, there would have been 50 cows below us with, maybe 10 to 15 bulls, all ranging in size from, small satellites all the way up to, magnificent herd bulls. I guess for me personally, there was just nothing that sort of next level above. there was maybe 4 or 5 that were all really, really good bulls. But yeah, just still wasn't that next level above. And it sounds so dumb. Like, it's so dumb. But in my mind, I just had, like, I probably took it for granted where I'm like, there's no way that I'm going to leave here without shooting a bull. And obviously, as you would have seen in the film, like, we had 1 day left. And it would have been like a half a day, a rush day. Wouldn't have left us time to go to the airport or go back to Bozeman and clean our gear and pack and all the rest of it. Like, it was literally going to be like a half day morning of hunting. We would have been probably packing out stuff, all afternoon, pack up, drive back, pretty much not sleep, clean our gear, get on the plane, which obviously would have been a crappy ending to the trip and potentially still not shoot a bull. But yeah, for some reason in my mind, like, I just, from talking, probably had too many people in my ear about how good this tag was, and probably a bit too picky on what bull I wanted to shoot. But nevertheless, this afternoon was, pretty special, just sitting there, pretty low expectations of obviously not actually moving in once again. But yeah, just being able to watch these bulls like urinating, kicking up dust, like digging their antlers into the ground, flicking them up. A few bulls fighting and stuff, just carrying on, absolutely mayhem, bugling. I don't know. It was a really, really special afternoon. And it just, to be honest, it sort of keeps raising the bar on what, obviously these high density elk hunts, what it can be like elk hunting. And it's going to be interesting going back to, the public this year with really, really low densities. We're just excited to hear a bugle, but I mean, that is the beauty of this hunt, and obviously why there's so much competition to get these tags. But yeah, to be able to witness it and then obviously get it on film so we can relive it every day and whenever we watch it, was really special to Ayden and I.
This was probably one of those encounters where, like, we referred to it as Jurassic Park just for the amount of bulls doing crazy stuff below us there on the bench. Like, as James said, anywhere you sort of pointed the camera, and I could just picture David Attenborough sort of narrating what was unfolding before us, where if you were to describe out of the whole trip and everything I've experienced elk-wise, which is only like this one trip, to be honest, I'd just show people this, like, scenes or highlights from this afternoon. It was just the way the ridge before us was sort of lit, and the way there was some bulls like just sleeping on the edge of this massive cows because they were so buggered and probably beaten and bruised from fighting. And then there were some other bulls, as James said, that were just like raking up dirt, smashing saplings, urinating on themselves, bugling. Other bulls would like run past within 50 meters and then sort of chase a cow and cut her back to the mob. And all this was just unfolding before us for literally until the light faded, and then we slunk away back to camp and sort of left it all undisturbed. And it was just incredible to watch that fighting and sparring and truly just like a natural spectacle, I guess. And as I said, like, if David was there narrating it, it would have been perfectly fitting. But it was cool to, I guess, that was one of the hunts where I acknowledged with James, like, I don't think there was a shooter in there. And even if there was, it was just going to be hard to get into that exposed bench. And that's probably why they chose to rut there, was just because they were comfortable doing so and they could see what was coming around them and things. But it was just, incredible. And to be honest, probably filled the tank a little bit for us. Like, I remember from there, we were like very, very amped and eager to get out the next morning and get out for a really good hunt and just build that momentum.
And lucky we did have that, because the next couple of days, I mean, it was building sort of every day, but we just had the worst luck with tires. Like, I can't remember. I think it was like 6 tires or something ridiculous that we popped. And this day we were actually hoping to go back to, we had planned to go back to that BLM land. And I remember getting up that morning and we literally had a flat tire, and then driving down the hill and then getting another flat on the way down the hill. Like, I think they were just 4-ply tires. So, and where we were camped was like a very, very, very rocky area. So like we were crawling down the hill at like 10 Ks an hour, and you just hit a rock wrong and psss, and then the whole sidewall would get like ripped out or whatever. And we end up going and stealing a compressor and a puncture kit and patching one tire, and then getting down the hill, and then pretty much stealing the one of the utes from the farmer, which we'll be forever thankful for. And heading into town with these two busted tires. But I think the biggest thing and probably the funniest thing, and just to give a bit of context, was whenever Ayden and I would go into town for any reason, whether it was, supplies or fixing a flat tire, we'd always swing past Macca's and get a chocolate thick shake. And the main reason why was obviously we weren't really chasing the Macca's actual meals because pretty nasty. But that chocolate thick shake was super calorie dense. I think it was something like 900 calories or something for a large, which was just ridiculous. And obviously, when you've been flogging yourself on the mountain for over 2 weeks now, you're chasing every ounce of calorie you can get. And I remember every time we went into town, that was our little treat. But yeah, it was obviously pretty down that day. And you'll see that sort of little saga or scene in the videos where I asked the Macca's worker if I can have a chocolate thick shake and if it's going to cure depression. And obviously, old mate didn't hear me. But no, it was pretty good. That chocolate thick shake definitely brought the spirits back, and we were out on the road again, able to go swap cars and head out for an arvo hunt. Obviously didn't see any elk, but yeah, it was good to be back out there. And probably just a bit more context around, had so many tire troubles, which we probably didn't document and share how much it happened and how pissed off we were very well. But yeah, I can't tell you how many tires we popped, and it was probably one of the hardest parts of the film, where we did lose a lot of time sort of in that 4 or 5 days to two tires, when obviously it would have been great if we were out on the mountain hunting.
Yeah, and that's where I think, again, not being able to document it properly was, whenever something went wrong or there was something to be done, my natural, I guess, thoughts and feelings were to just get in and help. Whereas we've sort of learnt that, whilst that makes things faster, you sort of lose that storytelling aspect of the film or the hunt or whatever. And whilst, it's why we've actually gone away from, the second person or the cameraman taking binoculars. That person doesn't really take binoculars on these hunts anymore, purely because we find that if I'm sitting there trying to, in this instance, find a bull elk for James to shoot, I'm not filming him, doing so, or filming the bull elk that we've found. It's kind of me being an active, hunter as well. Whereas by removing that urge to do things, you end up documenting a lot more. And I think, in the instances of some of these flat tires, what you don't see is that I remember there was one morning I jumped in under and I'm, lifting it up, doing the jack, taking the tire off, putting the new one on, blah, 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 while James is running 5 miles away to get a compressor so that we can come back and patch it up and do all that type of stuff, just so that one punctured tire or 2 punctured tires don't turn into a whole day of lost hunting, but hopefully we can get back out for that afternoon. And that's just how we were thinking. So there is a lot more to these hunts that you obviously don't see, but I guess that's where there's a cool aspect to these podcasts where we can often, jump in and give you guys a bit more of a behind the scenes look into exactly what goes on these adventures.
Know where you stand with onX, the most accurate GPS mapping tech for outdoor enthusiasts. Trusted by millions of hunters worldwide. We utilize onX whilst hunting in the US. Its mapping systems, specialist drop pins, tracking features, topographical maps, and accuracy is unmatched. Being able to plan and prepare for our hunts overseas in the comfort of our own home is a game changer. If you're looking at hunting in the US, Canada, or Alaska, then onX is a must. With the rutting encounters building, we're just getting more and more chances every day, as you guys have seen. But one really, really cool encounter that I'm sure Ayden and I will never forget was a bull that we affectionately named Clubby after the encounter. And he was had 5 points on one side, but only a club on his right-hand side that sort of come down past his eye almost. And I remember we were walking up this ridge and there was bulls bugling all around us, and it was sort of getting on in the afternoon, and this bull bugles and sort of erupts out, and all we could see was his left-hand side, which is his 5 side. And I was like, oh, this could be an all right bull. And anyway, he comes out of the aspens, and then all you see is Clubby, and he walks out and comes up to us at 5 meters, super close, and he's just sitting there, does this little bugle or whatever, and you can hear him breathing. It's so and anyway, me and Ayden are looking at each other. We're full film mode and full hunt mode, and arrow on the string, and being super I don't know, stealthy and stuff. We didn't really have much cover. And anyway, he goes to walk off and he's probably 30 meters away and he's facing the other way. And I do like had the diaphragm in my mouth, do a little cow call, and he quickly turns around and bugles again and starts coming back. And, we're playing around. And then after maybe a minute or so, we've got no cover. We're just standing in the open. And like, yeah, we've actually got to go. Like, it's time to hunt. Like there's probably 3 other bulls or 4 other bulls behind him that are bugling. Like this thing needs to piss off. And I remember we like go to walk off and old mate just like sitting there looking at us. Just like, nah, don't care. Like obviously maybe full rut mode. I don't know. Like maybe that's club is putting pressure on his brain. I don't know. But he, did not care about us at all. Like just sitting there, completely not fazed by these 2 humans like walking around and stuff. And you see the line, like if only there was a big one that was that dumb, but he did not care about us, like pretty much just walked off, sat there, looked at us like, maybe 30, 40 yards the whole time as we walked off and ran up the hill to go check out these other bulls, which there was, one that we got in on, but just sort of ran out of light. But yeah, I just remember Clubby just being like the most casual elk you've ever seen. And it would have been nice if he was a massive, massive elk and did not care about us, but it wasn't that day.
I think in all fairness, he was probably a bull where if on a general tag, I would have definitely taken him just for how unique his antlers were. And for those of you that haven't seen the footage, I urge you to go and do so. It was from the date was September 18th, and you see this bull, run into 5 meters or so, and he's got this drop tine looking antler, but it's actually his main beam, and I dare suggest that he's damaged his skull or his pedicle or something like that previously, and it's something that he'll obviously have moving forwards for life now. But what it was is the antler basically dropped from his right hand side antler and came down probably 10 or so inches, but it was super thick and then formed this almost like club or a big ball at the end of it, and it was just wonky and so unique. And then, as James said, the way he come into a few yards, like I just remember like looking through the viewfinder with our smallest lens and then kind of like taking my eye away from the viewfinder just to see how close this thing was, because I could hear it breathing and I was kind of like missing the encounter for what it was because I was looking at it through the camera. And I remember like taking my eye away and being like, holy shit, this thing's going to like step on me here in a second. And then, as James said, he walks away, and instead of like letting him just walk away to the timber, James just gives him a cheeky cow call, and this thing stood over us again and comes running back into within bow range, and we stand up and start moving, and this thing was just like, wait, but where's the cow? And it was just, it was one of those encounters that was just truly magical. It was so cool to have, this massive big bull elk just right on top of you and breathing on top of you, and hopefully that comes out in the footage that you guys can see.
September 19th was a huge day. It was a massive day. We were on this herd of elk pretty much from first light. We climbed to a central ridge and were sort of glassing, and we saw and we could hear them, and then we looked there and they were on this open face. And Ayden and I essentially started moving in that direction. Probably got there maybe like 7:30 as these elk were climbing the biggest ridge that we had access to hunt, but probably also one of the biggest hills in the unit. And these elk went up sort of 1,500 feet of vertical elevation. And so Ayden and I took the backpack off, and we're sprinting up this hill after this herd. And there was one bull in particular which I called Hercules because it was this big 6x7, had this little kicker, but he looked super heavy, like even for his length. And he was the bull that I really had my heart set on that day. And we've run up this hill and pretty much dropped down into this little spot. We've actually done almost in this hunt, we've done like a huge circle where we've probably started maybe 3 or 4 Ks from camp and then swinged a big left to get up to the herd, and then they've sort of done this big loop back towards camp. So we're only probably about maybe 2 Ks from camp at this point, but we've run maybe 1.5 Ks up over this big hill and then dropped down into this big, deep, dark gully. And as you can imagine, like we've stripped all these layers off and whatnot. And Ayden and I had no food, no water, and we've run down into this gully, and all these all these elk and this herd are just rutting in the timber, and we froze their ass off, to be honest. We obviously being saturated and being now on the sort of west facing slope where there's no sun, we got in on the herd, and as we had these thermals ripping up the gully in front of us now, and obviously not being in the sun, and then all of a sudden it just got like super cold. And I remember we actually spoke about it just previously on another podcast, but I remember like everything started like shaking and hurting. Like our backs were seizing up, like my forearms were cramping, which I've like never had before. I had to keep like changing which hand I had the bow in, and obviously we can't really move because like we had satellite bulls at like 20, 30 meters coming past us. There was cows at like 35 meters. And yeah, it was just like at one point I remember like looking at Ayden and hearing his like teeth chattering. And we just got so cold. But after probably, what seemed like hours, but it was probably only 15, 20 minutes. The sun didn't really come back out. It just sort of like stopped being so cold. I guess the wind sort of died off a little bit. And we got, maybe it's just because the sweat and everything dried, I got a little bit more comfortable. But we'd sort of set ourselves up about 35 meters, if not less. I think it was like 32 from memory, off these cows that were off over this little gully, this little dip in the thick timber. And we were sort of in the open a little bit, but just in the shade. And I remember seeing Hercules, this big 6x7 bull, like come up and was like checking these cows. I remember trying to cow call to get him just come a couple of steps out of the timber. And just because that's the problem with over there. Like it's not like our vegetation here. Like with those big pines, really a lot of the time it's just finding somewhere that you can like actually shoot one of these bulls, if that makes sense. Like you can see them at 20 meters, but it means nothing. Like often they've got to be at 5 or 10 meters. Like you're really trying to find somewhere where you can actually get an arrow away. Because, you can see them all day through the thick timber and stuff. And we could see these bulls walking around at like 40 and stuff. But it was just a matter of actually being able to get an arrow away at one of these bulls. And, I remember a couple of cows coming below us and feeding out, and a younger bull coming out with them. And I was really hoping that Hercules was going to come out and push him off, but he didn't. And then the herd sort of got up, arvo after Ayden and I had sat there for, a couple of hours, freezing our ass off, no food, no water. And they moved off, and they started moving off into some pretty open country. And obviously being such a large herd with so many bulls, satellite bulls, the herd would stick together, but they'd sort of rut and carry on and stuff. And we followed them up, and we're now talking probably 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Gets dark at 7:30, 8 o'clock, and we're making a decision whether we need to go back, get our boots. Do we have our boots?
Yeah, we definitely had our boots. It was just whether or not we go and get food, water in our backpacks, which are a couple of kilometers away.
Yeah, and went and obviously made the sensible decision to keep chasing this herd of elk, which now we're getting closer and closer to camp. And we end up pushing in. They end up settling on this like extremely open face, had like a couple of rocks really as cover.
Yeah, and to give a bit of perspective here, like you can jump over to the Twin Elements website, and one of our better prints, one of my favorite photographs that we were able to capture from over in America, it's titled Elk Ridge, and we've got 2 different variations. There's a portrait one and a landscape one, but you can see this bull that James is calling Hercules, as well as a couple of satellites and then a heap of his cows just up on this open exposed ridge. And we were just sitting there, and I remember sitting there going, holy crap, that's actually like beautiful and a stunning photograph. And it was just on this golden ridge and all these elk just sitting there, and it makes it look warm and cozy in that, just with the colors and the hues and everything. But I remember just being so cold and exhausted. And as James said, we were sitting there going, do we go and follow him? And again, following him isn't trying to just stay on the tail end of him. It's trying to think, where are these elk going? And we're jumping on Onyx and stuff, and we go, holy crap, we've got to go all the way back around, up over this hill, get around the far side, and then come in with the wind right on them. And that's what we ended up doing, and had another stalk on them.
And to be honest, it was it was a very, very low percentage stalk. Like we were coming down from above, fairly exposed, very little cover other than grass. Like I remember just being on my ass and scooting down with the bow sort of in my lap, Ayden filming me. And just as the thermals, like at this point, we were getting pretty desperate. I remember the only thing that was a bit of relief and comfort in my mind was just because it was so open, I was like, at least I'm going to be able to get a shot at this thing if we can get into range sort of thing. And I remember once again, probably being about 100, 120 and just starting to scoot down. And I'm not sure, I honestly don't think they winded us. I think it was just the sort of the movement of the mob where, they started moving. And then I think some cows got below us and actually winded us, and that sort of alerted them and they've all taken off. But it, that was pretty much the end, of which it then just sort of left us in a bit of a weird position where we were about a K and a bit from camp. And I remember because we hadn't eaten, so now it's like sort of 6, 7 o'clock. It's not fully dark, but it's like, okay, well, let's go back to camp and actually get a drink, because we haven't drank for almost like 12 hours and done, a fair amount of running. Went to camp, and I remember it was just like a feast where I was like, okay, we need to try and get like as many calories as we can back into ourselves. So I remember it was just like eating Cliff Bars, like eating dehydrated meals, drinking as much chocolate milk as we could. And we had a discussion because our backpacks were still now probably 3.5, 4 Ks away.
Yeah, what James doesn't or forgets to tell you there is that James went back to camp and started hoeing into some food while the soulless cameraman went back to get his backpacks, because this discussion that James reckons we had was, stuff the packs, leave the camera gear there that's already in the pack. It's not going to rain overnight. We'll just get them in the morning. And my thoughts were, we're going to lose hours of footage, or something's going to go wrong. It's going to rain. We're going to wake up and there'll be elk somewhere else, so we're not going to get there, and we're going to have to get the backpacks at some even worse, less convenient time. So what James was failing to tell you there is that I was sensible and had to walk 3 or 4 Ks in the opposite direction to go and grab these backpacks, and not only mine, but James's as well. And then trek back, which was even slower because I had 2 backpacks, managed to see some mule deer. I just remember thinking this day could not get any worse. And then I saw these mule deer and was kind of like, okay, it's been a good day. And took a few photos of them just on the ridgeline, and then got back just after dark. And James, fortunately, to redeem himself, had all dinner and everything, as he was saying, ready to go, and we just hoed into it. And to be honest, I remember being that buggered, and I remember like my hammies were cramping on the walk back, my back and my kidneys were sore just from, again, probably not drinking enough water. I had a massive headache. The only thing that felt good, which is a testament to like the lower boots, is my feet felt fine. But all my muscle fibers basically from my lower back and hammies and stuff were super, super sore. And I just remember genuinely being worried about, for 20 days now, we'd pretty much backed it up every morning, getting up at 4 a.m, hunting all day and that type of stuff. And I remember just getting like this mindset in my head of like, geez, I hope I don't wake up tomorrow morning and I'm just buggered, like can't get out of bed sort of thing, or at least feel that way. And that's probably where the strength of having 2 of us obviously carries through. And even though we felt that way for a short bit of time, just getting a hot feed into us and doing, things that way, jumping straight into bed, and then, getting up the next morning and just not giving ourselves the option of sort of quitting was a massive thing. And something that I look back on and definitely like proud of, I guess, is the fact that we were able to back it up and rightfully so, as you're about to hear, because it ended up being a massive day for us and for the film and our adventure.
Yeah, I think just like taking care of ourselves. Like I remember we got back that night, and like we said, we just like smashed so much food. I swear you came back to camp first, by the way. So you went straight out. What a man. Jeez, animal.
Yeah, well, I didn't see the point of traveling 1.5 kilometers in the opposite direction, sitting down, eating, getting full, smashing water, everything like that, and then just traveling 5.5 Ks the other way to come back even later in the dark, because from memory, my headlamp was probably with the packs and I wanted to get there before dark.
Yeah, that's why I was prepared to leave it. But I think I just remember that night, like I think we probably drank 2 or 3 liters of water, like 2 or 3 liters of milk. Like I remember just trying to drink as much. Like on this hunt, we actually had Nesquik. There's Nesquik in the US, which is pretty funny. And I remember personally just thinking like, milk is like such a good calorie dense liquid. And so, I remember, I think we eat like 1.5 dehydrated meals each. Like I remember we ate, like I just remember eating, like just being like, I don't care, just eat and then feel sick and then just keep eating. And then when you think you've got no space, drink like as much milk as you can. And to be fair, I woke up and I woke up the next day probably no more sore than I'd previously woken up any other day, which was interesting considering we'd done like a pretty good day. Like we probably would have done like in total maybe 8 to 10 miles. So, a fair amount of distance. And like obviously running up that big hill and stuff and then not eating all day. But yeah, I just remember being like, okay, I actually don't feel like shit.
I think also just from having multiple like days throughout the whole trip of eating well, and just making sure we were diligent with, even if we don't really feel like eating, we just ate and drank water and replenished our bodies almost like a car, just removing any emotion from it, just making sure we had the right fuel to keep going. But I definitely woke up more so very inflamed and sore in my hands and probably like my lower back. And I remember that was probably more so just from being super cold the previous day. Like I remember being super worried when we were sitting there on that mob of elk and like a satellite bull would come out, and I was like checking multiple times to make sure I'd hit record just because I couldn't actually feel my fingers on the camera. And like when James was saying that my teeth were chattering, I remember thinking like an elk was just going to bust and look at us, because like for me, when your teeth are chattering in your head or in your skull, it sounds so loud, as you can probably tell. And I just remember being like, how are these elk not hearing this? Like that's how loud it was and off-putting, I guess it was. So it was definitely the coldest day hunting I've ever had, probably if not, the coldest day I've ever experienced. And it wasn't temperature-wise any real different to anything else. It was just shows you the difference of like when everything goes badly. It hadn't even gone badly, to be fair, but just we'd failed to, meet the requirements of what that weather and those conditions sort of need. And again, running up and down from before daylight, trying to get to the highest point. And then as soon as we laid eyes on these elk, recognizing they had to run a couple of miles to get in front of them, and just sweating in our base layer thermals and not having any warm clothes to put on as wind, shields and things afterwards, just exacerbated that problem. And, it's funny because now we look back and you don't remember it as sort of being that bad, which is the cool thing about a lot of these hard things you do in the moment. It sucks and you're kind of like, this is the worst thing ever. And then it's the worst thing that you've done this far is what you got to sort of remind yourself. And then there's always the next thing, and you just keep layering and putting experience over the top of it, which, hardens you and refines you to, being able to more capable to do the next hard thing. But I guess that day was sort of required to get into the next day, which is ultimately when James shoots his bull elk. And yeah, sort of for that reason, September 20th is always going to be a favourite of ours in regards to Montana and the USA and hunting. Originating in Texas, USA, Numa Outdoors has formulated a durable, breathable, quiet and comfortable camouflage lineup for all terrain, seasons and pursuits. You may have seen us across our socials running the new Renegade lineup in our recent Northern Territory adventures. That's because the Renegade lineup is perfect for early season, hot and humid conditions in the heat. We're pleased to announce that the Numa camouflage lineup is stocked exclusively by Venture Hunting and Outdoors here in Australia and available now. Head to their website to check out the whole range today.
So the big day started pretty typically like all the rest of them, except maybe with a different feel. Like it sounds silly, like it was our last full day of hunting. But yeah, even then there was no doubt in my mind still that, we were going to get it done. Ayden may have thought otherwise. But yeah, I don't know. I knew, like in my heart, soul, fibers, pinkies, whatever you want to say. I don't know. I thought we were getting an elk, and there was probably at this stage maybe a little bit of, I don't know about doubt, but just stress. There was a little something there, but it was like, I don't know, like it was just because every day was getting more and more. Like it was like, yeah, we were.
I definitely think there was doubt because for the previous probably 3 or 4 days, there were bulls that we were like, yep, we're going to shoot you. And we couldn't shoot. And we kind of realized how hard it was to actually shoot a herd bull. And we're not talking about satellite bulls. There were like in the previous day, as we said, there were good bulls, like over 300-inch bulls that walk past at 20 meters and were just left to walk past. Whereas we're talking about over the previous 3 days and that Hercules realizing that there's a whole difference between going, okay, there's a herd bull. Now we've got to get past 30 or 40 or 50 cows and have him at 30 meters. And not only do we now have to have him at 30 meters, but he has to walk into a spot where, as James was saying, he's out of those pines or he's within bow range and we can get the shot. But not only can we get the shot has to be on film. And like we'd set all these, difficult hurdles. And I think that's where I was kind of like probably more realistic as to like, this is not just happening. And thankfully I was wrong. And it wasn't that I was wrong. I sort of actually agree with what James is saying. Like I believed I don't think we would have got up this morning if you didn't think that we were like, as James was sort of saying there, is edging closer every stalk, every day, every minute of this hunt, getting closer and closer and closer to achieving our goal. And like you could have looked at it and said, it's taken us 20 days and we're no closer to shooting a bull elk. Or the way I think we reframed it is like, we've spent 20 days refining everything to get it done, when we need to. And that's sort of a massive thing with mentality and mindset. I think that put us in a good stead for this morning.
And I think the other thing too was there was like a lot of little moments that obviously didn't go our way in the hunt or stalks before it that like very easily could have, like even looking at like daggers, like Hellboy or whatever, like, 35 meters off him. Like there was so many circumstances that, especially in the 4 or 5 days leading up to this where we like, Hercules and stuff where it's like, I could see a patch at, 35 meters where it's like it was high on his back, but it's like there was no way that I was going to thread the needle through like a 6-inch gap by 6-inch gap to then like launch that in and hopefully have it drop in the right spot. Like it was, I don't know, like there was just a lot of little things that's like, okay, if it was like had gone another way, there would have been a dead bull on the ground, which I don't know, reassuring, also like pain in the ass, not going to lie. But anyway, things were building up and this morning was the same in the sense we got to a central vantage point. There was a couple of areas where bulls had sort of been, rutting, or herds had been rutting and, got into this one spot and could see a herd sort of moving up into this area. And, we ran in there with a big 6 and 6 in mind. And we could see as the herd was moving up into this basin, there was a heap of like sort of satellites and bulls that were coming off the ridge and dropping down. One in particular was a big 6x7 that sort of walked down and bugling and, tried to stop him, drew back when we were like 35 meters away, but he just never pulled up and sort of walked. He actually went up into the creek and had a drink and stuff. And there was bulls up on our right that in hindsight probably should have just busted, but was a bit concerned with like scaring them off and had this bull at like 60 or 70 where you could see his antlers, him drinking and in I think, would they be willows, those little bushes sort of things?
Yeah, most likely. And it was a pretty tight little creek. And I remember like for him to be drinking, his head would have been covered by probably half a metre, if not more, of earth and sort of bank.
Yeah, and should have just been less sort of cautious of these other bulls and stuff and just really pushed in there because he pushed out and came past it. I think it was about 50 or so metres and same thing, like gave him a couple of oys trying to get him to stop and he didn't stop. And he moved up into the mob and followed up the mob, was able to get in there amongst, and there was at this stage like there was just elk and bulls everywhere. Like we had, satellites at sort of 20 meters with cows and stuff. There was bulls off on our right bugling. The main herd was sort of a little bit up the ridge, up on our left. I remember just seeing this bull, which I actually thought was the same bull as the one that was in there before, the 6x7. He came across the creek with a hot cow and bugled right in front of us at 40 yards and I'd already ranged the cow. And I just remember drawing back, settling the pin and letting it fly. And as you see in the video, like just as I shoot, he goes and takes, a step, which resulted in me hitting him, 5 or 6 inches further back, like low, but further back than I had thought. And I was a bit, to be honest, one of the conversations we'd had with the property owner the day before was people hitting bulls in this area And people thinking they've killed them, and then they go up there after half an hour and they jump up and run off. And anyway, one of the blessings of videoing is being able to review the footage. And as he's running up, he does this half moon of maybe 50 meters or so, falls over, and then he's lying there and then gets up again and then sort of walks down into this bush. And it was a pretty isolated bush, like had very open, areas around it. And so we could see quite well, but couldn't really see into it very well. And all the other elk came down, obviously, and they're looking into it and stuff. And after probably 10 or not even probably 5 minutes or so, one of those moments that goes for a lifetime, they all sort of moved off. But we reviewed the footage and we could see like a lot of blood coming out of him. Okay, that's great. But just where the shot was with being so low and a little bit back, we were just concerned that, it may look good, but it may be one of these moments that we're pretty close to a boundary as well. Probably only 500, 600 meters off a boundary fence too. So we didn't really want him jumping up and running off. And so we gave him a fair bit of time, and we ended up going back, getting a spotting scope, setting it up. I could see his antlers, and it's one of these things that you're like looking into this bush and you're like, oh, I think he's dead. Like, I don't think his antlers are moving and stuff. Then you're like, oh, maybe he just took a breath. I don't know. And I remember just sitting there and how long did we give him? An hour or two?
Yeah, I think we gave him an hour. And to be honest, like chiming in here, I think rightfully so. Like what I think you failed to mention is that you initially ranged the cow at 40 meters. And then not only does she walk a couple of steps away, but he then comes across the creek, chases her even further. So when you actually shoot him, he was probably closer to like 47 meters or 48 meters, I reckon, which accounts for the drop. And then, as you said, like I think your line was perfect, but you're probably like 6 to 8 inches low. And I honestly think you're so lucky that he did take that step forward, because if you had have hit where his leg was straight, I think if you had have hit him 6 to 8 inches higher, you would have heart shot him at the top of the heart perfectly, if not bottom of the lungs. Whereas because he, you shot 6 to 8 inches low, if you had have hit him, without him moving, I think you would have hit the bottom aspect of his humerus, or the top aspect of his humerus, like above his elbow, and it would have literally just hit bone, I think, and not done anything. Whereas because he takes a step forward, it actually exposes his underarm or his armpit, I guess, and again, you haven't necessarily given credit here to the Cayuga like pilot cut, but I think by you shooting that specific broadhead and having those little bleeders, like as we find out later when we go and do the autopsy on this bull, like you barely nicked the back of his heart. And again, whether it was a bleeder or not, like it's hard to say, but it's one of those things where it did piss out quite a lot of blood. But again, if you were shooting any other just solid 2-blade, I don't know if you would have had the same result. And that's where it was a marginal shot. It was, caught up in the moment. Things happened super fast. We range a cow at 40 yards. I think the final shot is probably 47 yards. It's one of those things where this broadhead and this setup definitely gave you a bit of room for error.
See, I agree with most of that. With the cow situations, I range the cow and he pushes the cow out and pretty much comes and stands where she was standing. So he was at that distance. Like, I know that.
Yeah, I don't know. I remember looking at the footage and I could barely see the cow when I videoed her, and you said she's at 40 yards. And then he comes down, crosses the creek and goes up near that bush, which I reckon was about, if not.
Let the people decide.
Well, your arrow's about 6 inches shy, so you're either stuffed up or you stuffed up your range, but either way.
Definitely agree with what Ayden was saying about the pilot cut. 100%. Like, I honestly don't know if it was you can't tell if it was the bleeder or the actual main head. But and this is why we get asked all the time, like, why does Ayden shoot a Zot and why do I shoot a pilot cut? And this is one of the shots, I guess, that I refer to where it was definitely, end up being a marginal shot. And that bull was dead on his feet. And obviously, just nicking and taking out the bottom ventricle of his heart, was only probably a couple of mils off just hitting the heart, but not actually opening it up. And if I'd just cut through the heart muscle, like obviously he would have been in pain, but he probably would have actually survived. Whereas just opening it up, the actual ventricle up to allow that blood out of it, is obviously what killed him. But huge testament to the pilot cuts, especially with those. I just use the standard bleeders, but that's why I shoot them. Like, literally that they make massive holes. They do so much damage. While I will continue shooting the pilot cut, but we went up to him. Probably one of the saddest things for me was because he obviously died so quickly. It was quite warm, and he'd actually gone into rigor, and which sort of limited our leaving him there for an hour. It sort of limited our photo opportunities. Like he was pretty much tucked into that bush. We couldn't really drag him out, and we couldn't even like turn his head or move his head or anything like that, which did sort of limit how good the photos turned out and how much we could showcase just how like awesome of a bull he was. Not that, I know a lot of this has been about size and stuff, but I think for me now, like looking back, it's just more of a testament, like, spending 20 odd days with your brother out in the bush doing what we both love, hunting and filming. Like it could have been Ayden on this hunt and it wouldn't have taken away from it for a second. But yeah, it would have just been nice to showcase him off more as a beautiful animal as he was. But yeah, it was just the top of the highlight of an awesome 20 days spent in the bush. And never doubt that it was going to all happen.
And as you were saying there, like it's obviously was a bit of a warmer September sort of hunt. So as soon as we got some photos taken and all that type of stuff, put the tag on his antlers, we went to work carting the meat. And I think our initial haul was basically we just butchered the whole animal up, hung it in meat bags, and we weren't too worried about bears or anything like that. But we did obviously have bear spray on this hunt. But we'd removed the legs, quarters, neck meat, everything basically from the carcass or the gut pile, and then done a massive haul back to camp with, little odds and ends, whether it was the tenderloins, heart, back straps, the first batch of sort of lighter meat, as well as all the camera gear and stuff, and then proceeded to do multiple trips over the day. And I can't remember when we finished exactly, but it was a massive day because, as James was saying, the next day was sort of our last, being the 21st of September, and it was nice to not have to wake up at 4 a.m. and hike up the mountains and the hill to have got all of the meat work done the previous night, late into the night, and have a bit of a sleep in. As soon as that sun got up, we made some heart, bacon and eggs and enjoyed that, and then we're able to sort of pack up all the gear and start heading back to Montana or Bozeman, I guess. And rather than trying to hunt and be shooting an elk on the last half day with, limited time, we're actually able to make our flights and do all these sorts of things. But it was just an epic adventure and one that, hopefully we can replicate this September as you guys are all listening to this.
Yeah, we finished at about 2:30. I think we tucked into bed at about 2:30 in the morning. So that was a couple of trips. To be honest, the worst thing to carry out was the cape. Because, obviously like the neck meat and the back straps and stuff, it's not that heavy. Whereas the cape on like an elk, there's a fair bit there. But the other thing is there's not really a lot of structure. So it's a bit of a just awkward slab that sort of, I almost wish I did have an Eberly stock pack then to be able to like hold it into place. I remember it sagging heaps and I remember it just, being pretty shit to carry, to be honest. But there was a couple of trips in that. One of the probably stupidest things that happened was on this place, and it's probably just something to note for all you guys, and obviously a lesson for us to learn, probably more Ayden. But yeah, on this place, they'd never seen a bear, a grizzly that is, in their whole history, like ranching family history. And it ended up being that where we shot the elk, they ended up seeing their first grizzly that afternoon, only like 1.5 kilometers over the ridge on the next lot of private on the neighbours that I was just talking about. Just sort of sends shivers up your spine where you obviously think like what could have happened. I think Ayden had taken his bear spray off. I definitely still had mine on me. I remember putting it on my backpack, my front clip. Probably just more scared. I'm bloody shit scared of grizzlies. They haunt me. But yeah, even this trip, so where we're going this trip and mainly focusing, where you'll be, hopefully we're, I don't know, are we going to be tagged out by? Probably not. But yeah, where we're going this time, there's apparently no grizzlies ever been seen, and I will still be carrying bear spray. I do not care. Even if a bloody mountain lion or a black bear jumps on me, I will be prepared with bear spray. So yeah, but it was an awesome carry out. Like Ayden said, it was nice not to have to get up at 4 a.m. the next morning. I remember it was the shittest day out. It was crappy, rainy, windy. Was very thankful to be in there eating heart and bacon and eggs for brekkie, and actually being able to go back and clean all our gear properly before we came back to Australia and actually see our friends over there in Bozeman. And it was a fantastic end to an awesome adventure, and hopefully we can be reliving that right now over there in the US. The Hunting Australia Facebook group is now a club that you can join. Members get access to discount codes from leading businesses. You can acquire your New South Wales R licence membership, and every month they run incredible giveaways with thousands of dollars worth of top tier gear, but also give away guided hunts as well. So if you want to learn from the best or go in the running to win some incredible gear or maybe a hunt of a lifetime, or just want to be part of the greater hunting community, make sure to join the Hunting Australia group. Use code TWINELEMENTS to get 10% off your membership.
Alrighty, well, hopefully you all got a sense of just how epic that adventure truly was. James and I have such fond memories, and to be able to share that with my best mate, my brother, is something that I'll take to the grave. You guys can all obviously go and watch that now on the Twin Elements YouTube. Simply search Against All Odds, as we've called this podcast suitably. And then also keep an eye out for the upcoming 8-part series or vlog series where we sort of unpack a bit more of, the behind the scenes sort of stuff. And it's still cinematic, still all the footage and things that you love, just a bit more of a storyline and in-depth sort of retelling of that adventure. So it is that time of the show where James and I are going to unpack and get into your FAQs. So for those of you that have any questions following this podcast or just in general, please send us an email with the subject line FAQ to info@twinelements.com.au, or you can simply DM either James Doumtsis Outdoors, Ayden Doumtsis Outdoors, or Twin Elements on either Instagram or Facebook, and we will strive to answer those questions and get them featured on a future episode of the podcast.
So this first question comes in from Sean from Port Macquarie. So he emailed us, "Hey fellas, what is your ideal distance for a bow shot on both bantang and buffalo bulls? RE safety concerns on large, dangerous game." So
this one might sound a little bit silly and sort of maybe arrogant to say, but honestly, just as close as we can possibly get, generally, whether it's a buffalo or a rabbit, with any animals that we're trying to hunt, we're not necessarily worried about them noticing us and sort of, using that as a big reason to sort of pull up at, say, 50 meters and send a long bomb. The whole reason we bow hunt is to get physically as close as possible to the animals that we're trying to hunt. In our opinion, the closer that we get, the better that we feel, sort of our odds of putting the shot exactly where it needs to go and executing the perfect, fatal, humane, whatever words you want to add to it, sort of shot is. So we also, there is a benefit with that big game hunting, where say our first shot's at 20 meters and the bull runs 5 meters or 10 meters and pulls up and you're sort of looking the other way going, geez, I'm about to fall over, I'm losing blood, sort of what's happening here. You can put a second shot in. Whereas if you start pulling up at perhaps the end of your comfortable range at 50, one, to sort of, be out of that danger zone and do a rougher or riskier shot, the second, or the likelihood of putting in a second shot is a little bit reduced, I think, if they run the other way, because then it's out to 70, 80, 90, 100 meters. But also with any big game hunting, we see it as one shot, only shot. We hate tracking animals, especially big game, thinking what's waiting for us at the end of this, blood trail, for example. It's just one of those things where, to answer your question, as close as possible is ideal. And generally that's less than 30 meters for us on most of these hunts.
I'd probably add in there, a lot of the time, it's not something that we take into account, but a lot of the time we're hunting them in, semi-wooded timber. A disclaimer on as close as we possibly can would probably be if it was on an open flat. If you've got a scrub bull or a bantang or a buffalo and it's just completely open and the grass is only ankle high. I personally probably wouldn't necessarily go right into 10 or 20. I'd probably try and get to 20. It's more just probably deciding what sort of shot to have, in the sense that if he is very much aware, looking at me at 20 meters and there's no cover and I don't have, a tree to say that I could try and get behind or jump up or whatever, it's probably a decision whether you even take that shot or not. But yeah, in most parts, like if there's decent cover around, like then it's a decision, like what Ayden said, as close as possible. But if it's where you've got no cover whatsoever, then I'd probably, be trying to get to 20 to 30 still. But just try and kneel down in the grass as I take the shot, for example. So you're well within range, but you're just trying to not skyline yourself, or especially if they like know that you're there, for example, just try and limit the risk of them coming your way. But yeah, it definitely would be something I'd be thinking about, but it wouldn't, impact my decision to be like, oh, okay, I'm going to like stop at 50 because I think, that's going to be easier. Like, I mean, if you're on a big open flat, like they're going to chase you down, not that much easier from 50 as they are from 30. If anything, you're probably going to do a slightly worse shot, which means it's going to be easier for them to chase you down. So, still try and get in as close as I can, but just probably be more cautious of when I shoot and picking my shots if I think they're like onto me. But then that's, just hunting buffalo and scrubbers and bantang in general. Like you don't really want to just put an arrow into them. Like you really want to make sure it's a good shot because they do have a large margin for error. Just because they've got so much blood, they can, you may kill them, but it's just more a fact that you may not find them because they're going to run away.
And a follow-up to Sean's first question, he says, do you always prefer to shoot a bantang or buffalo bull standing as opposed to a bedded animal? What are the pros and cons? Fantastic vids and podcast, boys. Keep up the great work.
Thanks very much, mate. Sean. So I personally would rather shoot one standing, but it's not limited to. As you would have seen in my hunt, part 2, I think it was day 2, I snuck in on a really good bantang bull and had him bedded and was very, very tempted to shoot him bedded. It was about 45 minutes. We were sitting in there at sort of 20 meters and then the wind ended up swirling and he ran off. But he, at stages was sort of arcing, leaning a bit back. It's just generally when they're bedded, they sort of tuck that elbow up and it does limit where you can shoot. But there was times where he had his leg forward and stuff that I probably could have shot. It was more just... We knew there was plenty of good bulls there. If that was my one opportunity and I didn't think it, I probably would have had that shot. But it was just more there was a pretty expensive price tag / hunt resting on it as well. So didn't really want to risk that on a potentially more marginal shot. So I just decided to wait and obviously didn't win that coin toss and he winded us and took off. But definitely wouldn't be scared. To shoot a bull of any type bedded. Just making sure you're getting, there's a fair bit of bone in the way there. So just making sure you're getting good sight picture and just, can hit where it needs to is probably the only consideration that I've got.
I guess adding to this just slightly is, with all of these big game, I really like, especially like as the season goes on and some of these animals lose condition, is visualizing the rib cage. And you can actually sometimes see, especially with like scrub bulls and buffalo, bantang less so because a lot of these bulls are still in pretty good condition, but you can see where the ribs are literally sitting, and when they're about 1 inch to 2 inches thick and you've then got a little bit of intercostal muscle and skin, it sounds silly, but if you can get to 20 meters and that animal's not moving, all it's doing is simply expanding and contracting, inspiring, expiring oxygen, and you can time it that I'm going to hit that sort of high double lung shot at 20 meters and hit between two ribs so that the entry isn't punching through bone, like thick rib bone, then that's just going to lead to a more effective shot. And that's something that, definitely considered, and having watched plenty of footage back, it's something that I'm always mindful of on these big animals. But I think just with any bedded shots, as we've said in previous podcasts, like the bow hunting bedded boars, there's just less anatomy in terms of things going our way. Everything's generally more concealed or hidden and protected by greater amounts of sort of armor, whether it's bone or sort of poorer shot angles. So that's probably why, especially on the bantang and buff, when they are so big and strong and big animals, you just want to nail that perfect shot first time, opposed to having to do follow-ups.
And the last question comes in from Trent Smith. So we've got, "G'day, I don't know if you can help or point me in the right direction. I would like to bow hunt a scrub bull in the top end. Is there an outfitter or someone you recommend? Any help would be greatly appreciated. Thanks."
So as far as we know, there aren't anyone doing, like scrub bull or whatever hunts specifically, where like that's primarily the hunt that you can do. I do know that through Cayuga Adventures, they often have plenty of really good quality scrub bulls hitting the deck, but that's more of a boar sort of hunt. But they are quite competitively priced in terms of the hunting adventure. I think the scrub bulls are a bit of an add-on to that. But that is definitely one aspect to look into. That's not necessarily, the NT, but that is in North Queensland, Australia. And then as far as, great guides that we've had really good reputation and, hunts with, it'd be Big Country Safaris. They've got some big cranky sort of shorthorn bulls out on their concession. And then obviously Dingo Creek Hunting, which is where we've done a lot of the Bantang and boar hunting up there near Coburg Peninsula. I'm sure if you got in touch with any of those guys, they'd be able to at least, discuss options for a hunt like that or put you in the right direction. So that would probably be my 2 cents on the question, but thank you very much, Trent.
Well, that wraps up another podcast, guys. As you are hearing this, and as you would have got from the most recent podcasts, we are actually in the US at the moment. So we hopefully are tagged out by now on a few different critters, whether it be antelope, deer, or elk. But we did want to just take a second to mention a few new affiliates and brands that have come on board that we are going to be working with into the future. So the first one that we're super excited about is Carnivore Collective, making great mincing and salami sausage making gear. The next one is Walk and Stalk Game Bars. So they do a fantastic game bar and also a lift kit, which is a little pulley system for butchering out in the field, as well as their Walk and Stalk bars. Actually fantastic, as you can use it to drag animals. You can also use it to shoot off. Use the binos off. A super handy bit of kit, very versatile. We've got the Iron Gate knives, which make fantastic knives, whether it be in the kitchen or whether using on butchering out in the field. We've sort of got the complete collection there, really. We've got the knives, we've got the butchering kit, and as well as the hunting, and then we've got the mincing and sausage making kit. So we've got the perfect collective there. We've also got Hunting Australia, which is the Hunting Australia Facebook group. So they have come on board, just trying to increase the community that we've got here in Australia, and really grow that. So they have some fantastic giveaways on there. So if you want to join the tribe and community, you can do so. But really happy to be working with such great companies and brands. And hopefully you guys can get around them too in the future.
Yeah, I guess it's important to note there that we will be getting some discount codes available to you guys, our valued listeners, in the coming weeks. So make sure as soon as we get back from the USA, we'll get all of that up and running. So don't obviously wait too long. Make sure you get over there, check them out if you're in the market for a mincer, knives, anything like a game bar to be butchering your deer and game animals more cleanly. If you were looking to make a purchase and want to wait for a discount code, we should have that ready for everyone in early October. Just keep an ear out on the podcast and our socials, and we'll make sure that we let you guys know when we get those.
As usual, our valued listeners, you guys can get 10% off all our prints on our website by using the code The Twin Elements Podcast. So that will give you 10% off 40 prints. We've got honestly one for everyone, whether it's for your home office, whether it's for your office at work, whether it's for putting up and around the shops, presents for yourself, loved ones, partners. There is something there that everyone will love. So make sure to go and check them out. There's plenty of different sizes. And for you guys, our loyal listeners, you can get 10% off by using the code The Twin Elements Podcast. So get around that one, guys, and thank you for your support.
Lastly, on the topic of support, please continue to subscribe, review, and rate this podcast. James and I put a mountain of work into each and every episode, whether it's researching different things, just talking about our experiences, or reliving past adventures and stories. We absolutely love it and see this going long into the future. But if each of you who follow us and, continue to support the podcast, can just recommend it to a friend, share it on, a Facebook group, hunting group, whatever it may be. It helps us out immensely, and hopefully we can continue to grow this community and keep sharing basically our experience and from our lessons learnt through many, many failures. But there are a few successful stories, as you can hear here, with this podcast, which I've really enjoyed doing today. Against all odds was one of those things that I still remember the phone call that James, shot over to me as soon as he got the tag. He basically said, stop everything that you're doing. We're going on the hunt of a lifetime, and it's pretty cool to say that it lived up to that plus some. So we'll see you guys on the next episode of the Twin Elements podcast. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, guys.